today's lesson, we are going to start to explain and define what nth roots are. Um, when we're talking about nth roots, like we have graphed square roots and cube roots, we can have fourth roots, fifth roots, sixth roots, etc. You'll be able to find nth roots with a calculator. The next couple of days, we'll be able to simplify roots that will be written with radicals. You'll be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide roots that are not just square roots. But we're not getting to that until this is just going to be defining them. So, square roots. Square root of 25 is plus or minus 5. Why? 5 squared, 5 to the second power, 5 times 5 is 25. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. You'll be doing cube roots, fourth roots, etc. Same thinking when you're figuring these out. Why is the cube root of 8 equal to 2? Because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. Why is the fourth root of 81 plus or minus 3? 3 to the fourth is 81. Negative 3 to the fourth is 81. Radical notation for nth roots. Eventually you're going to see there's another way to write roots, but with a radical, you will see the radical with the number outside in the little corner. Cube root of 8, you see the 3 signifying cube root. Any other root besides a square root, you're going to see a number so you know what root it is. If it is a square root, you see nothing. It is understood that there's a 2 there, but we don't write it because we don't need to write it. We know that is a square root. When you're figuring out roots, if you are taking an odd root, you will have one answer. If I take the cube root of 8, I get 2. I don't get plus or minus 2, I get 2. With an odd root, this number inside could be positive or negative. If you took the cube root of negative 1,000, you're going to get negative 10. With odd roots, if you take an odd root of a positive, you get a positive. If you take an odd root of a negative, you get a negative. Even roots. So n is even. A has to be positive. You cannot take even roots of negative numbers. You cannot take the square root of negative 16. You can't take the fourth root, the sixth root, the eighth root. That number has to be positive. So we know that A has to be positive. We will get 2 roots plus or minus that answer. Now, the positive is the principal root. That's the root that the calculator gives you. If I say, what's the square root of 16? You get 4. But we could say, if we want both roots, it's plus or minus 4. Whereas with an odd root, you can't do that. If I say, what's the fourth root of 81? What number times itself 4 times its 81? We'd have 3. But if I said I want both of those roots, plus or minus 3. With a calculator or in your head, either way. I mean, if you're thinking in your head, the cube root of negative 216, you're thinking what number times itself is negative 3 times is negative 216. We can find it with our calculators, with the math key. We press for cube root, you can press number 4, negative 216. Answer is negative 6. You also could just know that it's going to be a negative. So that is negative 6. For a fourth root, if you have a root other than a cube root, what you want to do is put that root, that number in first. So I have a fourth root. You press math. Number 5 makes that root that x of 4. If you have a better calculator, it will actually make that x of 4. But the fourth root of 81, I plug that in, gives me 3. Why is it 3? Because 3 times itself 4 times is 81. Again, if you had a plus or minus sign there, you could put plus or minus, but they will tell you if they want that. Sixth root of 64, same thing. I would put a 6, press the math key, number 5, 64. If you think to yourself, what number times itself 6 times gives me 64? Can't be that big of a number. Answer is 2. Cube root of negative 64, you know, since it's odd, that can be negative. Your answer is going to be negative. What number times itself 3 times is negative 64? Would be negative 4. So that's with the calculator or using mental math to figure those out. Now, when simplifying with radicals, the one thing that you want to remember, and we get into this as we go on and it gets more difficult, but right now you are taking out perfect nth powers. So remember that the nth root of x to the nth is going to give you x. This nth root, just like if I said, what's the square root of 5 squared? This square undoes that square. It's 5. Okay. If I said, what's the fourth root of x to the fourth? The fourth root of x to the fourth is x. Now, if it's the fourth root of x to the eighth, what you want to think about is how many x to the fourth are there? Well, x to the eighth is x to the fourth times x to the fourth. The fourth root of that will give me an x. The fourth root of that will give me an x. X times x is x squared. That's showing all the work. Easier way to think about this, how many times does 4 go into 8? 4 goes into 8 2 times, x squared. So far as we're going to get, plus or minus the square root of 16y to the fourth. Think of that as square root is 2. Since I put the plus or minus, I want the plus or minus. What's the square root of 16? 4. What's the square root of y to the fourth? How many times does 2 go into 4? 2 times evenly, nothing left over. If I go over to the next one, I have a negative, it's going to stay a negative. That's on the outside. This is a square root. This is a quantity being raised to the eighth. I think to myself, how many times does that 2 go into that 8? 4 times. So the square root of that quantity to the eighth is that quantity to the fourth, because 2 went into that 8 4 times. Same idea here. Fifth root. Well, put in your calculator if you need to. What is the fifth root of 243? What number times itself 5 times gives you 243? I believe it's 3 without my calculator. Pretty sure. So then I think the fifth root of a to the 20th, right now they're going in there even times. How many times does 5 go into 20? 4 times evenly. Fifth root of b to the 25th. How many times does 5 go in there evenly? B to the 5th. That's my answer. If I took this times itself 5 times, I would get 243, a to the 20th, b to the 25th. D, square root of negative 16. Can you do that? Can't take an even root of a negative. No solution. If this is even and that's negative, can't happen. Last one down here at the bottom. Fourth root of 16, x minus 3 to the 12th. Fourth root of 16. What number times itself 4 times is 16? 2. You can put it in your calculator if you have to. Fourth root of x minus 3 to the 12th. It's a quantity. How many times does 4 go into that 12? How many of these would you have written down 4 times to give you that? Would be x minus 3. 4 goes into 12 3 times. Those are perfect nth roots. Everything that we've done has been a perfect nth root. Now you try these, write them down, try them, along with some other questions that you'll be doing. But try those and see how you do. And then your homework paper, you're going to do a couple problems at the top. You could do these problems on the back of that homework paper. And we'll see how you do tomorrow.